So, welcome to part 3 of We Need to Talk About Canada Incorporated. Today we're going to be talking about the Charter of Rights and Freedoms from 1982. We're going to start this video off in a weird way. And if you've seen my previous videos, you'll already know this. The Charter of Rights and Freedoms from 1982 has not yet taken force. This is provable through documents from the government's own website. It starts with the Queen's proclamation. The Queen had to make a proclamation to give it legal footing. And this, of course, is covered in video 1, which has to do with the BNA Act being repealed, essentially, in 1893. So now the Queen has to make a proclamation in order for the Charter of Rights and Freedoms to take effect. In her proclamation on April 17th, 1982, about halfway through, there are 2 paragraphs. They read as follows. The first one: "And whereas Section 58 of the Constitution Act 1982, set out in Schedule B to the Canada Act, provides that the Constitution Act 1982 shall, subject to Section 59 thereof, come into force on a day to be fixed by proclamation issued under the Great Seal of Canada." So Section 59 of the Charter has to take force before the Charter can come into force. And the very next paragraph: "Now you know that we, by and with the advice of our Privy Council for Canada, do by this our proclamation declare that the Constitution Act 1982 shall, subject to 59 thereof, come into force on a day to be fixed by proclamation issued under the Great Seal of Canada." So Section 59 of the Constitution has to be satisfied before the Charter can take effect. And to clarify, that's Section 59 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And the very next paragraph of her proclamation, after telling you that Section 59 has to be satisfied first before the Charter can take legal force, reads as follows: "Of all which our loving subjects and all others whom these presents may concern are hereby required to take notice and to govern themselves accordingly." So that leaves us in a funny spot, because we are decades later operating as if the Charter has taken force. Section 59 of the Charter is a language issue that reads that parents have the right to have their children educated in the language of their choice. This is an issue that Quebec did not sign off on and has not signed off on until today, at least. It reads that paragraph 23(1)A, which is the section 59 sends you to reference, to satisfy 59, 23(1)A has to be satisfied, which is the language issue. So 59 reads that 23(1)A shall come into force in respect of Quebec on a day to be fixed by proclamation issued by the Queen or under the Great Seal of Canada. And then Section 2 of 59 is the authorization of Quebec. It reads, "A proclamation under Section 1, which we just read, shall be issued only where authorized by Quebec." So the legislative body of Quebec has to formally approve 23(1)A. Then a proclamation will be made. Then Section 3 of 59 is the repeal of this section. This section may be repealed on the day paragraph 23(1)A comes into force in respect of Quebec, and this act repealed and renumbered. Consequently, upon repeal of this section, by proclamation issued by the Queen or under the Great Seal of Canada. So 23(1)(a), the language issue, has to be satisfied, formally approved by Quebec. Then a proclamation will be made, and Section 59 will be repealed and renumbered. None of these have occurred. Therefore, our Charter of Rights and Freedoms has not yet taken force. The funny spot we're in now is decades later, we're all operating as if the Charter is there. So, with that in mind, let's talk about the Charter. A charter is not something you do to a constitution. A charter is something you do to a company, a corporation, a business. A charter is the rules that employees have to follow for the entity at which they're working for. And this is pretty evident if you open up your Charter of Rights and Freedoms and you look under the first section, I believe it is, and scroll down to the application. Do you think that the Charter of Rights and Freedoms applies to you as an individual? Read that section, the application section, what the Charter, who the Charter applies to. And find out for yourself if you believe that the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, if it were in fact in force, applies to you. I don't believe it does. It's kind of evident when you start realizing that the governing body of Canada is in fact a corporation, which is why they chartered their constitution or their Bill of Freedoms, however they put it. But that's what you do to a corporation. You charter it. And this has implications with the British North America Act of 1867. Because even though the enacting clause was repealed in 1893, the British North America Act was delivered from the UK Parliament to the Canadian Parliament, missing the first page. And it wasn't essentially given to the Parliament, it was given to the Governor General. The consequence of that is that the British North America Act letters patent, or were letters patent. This is giving the Governor General the duly appointed right to run the body that governs the land of Canada. And if you've watched my first video, you understand that because the charter, Hudson Bay Charter of 1670, was letters patent essentially given to Prince Rupert by King Charles II to run a corporation in the land that was essentially Canada. And we also know through my first video that those papers were surrendered to the Crown in succession and heirs. The BNA Act was essentially letters patent, as it were, and are papers that allow the Governor General legal authority to hold his or her position. So, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms is just that, a charter of a corporation. And it establishes the guidelines and the rights of who the charter applies to. And that charter applies to a very specific group of people or should I say persons, and that can be found in the first section of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and towards the bottom of that subsection, I can't remember the number, but it's the application section. And there are 2 paragraphs there. And then there are 2 subsections there. The first one deals with who it applies to, and the second one clarifies some jurisdictional issue. So, upon closer inspection of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, we can see that even if it were a valid document that has taken force, it's a charter for a corporation, and that charter applies to its employees just as any charter does for any corporation. Thank you for listening to this episode. Cheers.